A millionaire found a boy crying on the staircase of his mansion and brought him inside. The next day, the boy revealed a secret about the millionaire's wife that left him frozen. Elias, a 10-year-old boy, walked the streets with faltering steps, his thin legs barely supporting the weight of his frail body. His face, marred by accumulated dirt, carried large, expressive eyes that oscillated between despair and a silent courage. He wore a faded shirt that had lost its original color, tattered shorts, and an uneven pair of slippers that barely protected his feet. As he passed through the bustling market, the smell of fresh food hit him like a blow to his empty stomach. He hadn't eaten for days, and his mind, already numbed by hunger, could only think about how to get something to survive. If I don't do this, I'll pass out from hunger, and no one will care. I need to eat now, no matter how. Elias's plan wasn't brilliant, but it was the only thing that came to mind amid the exhaustion. He stopped beside a stall full of fruit and bread. The vendor, a burly man with a stern face, was distracted, attending another customer. Elias's small, trembling hands quickly grabbed a loaf of bread and an apple. Before he could walk away, the vendor's deep voice echoed, drawing everyone's attention. "Hey boy, dirty little thief, you took something that's not yours." Elias's heart raced and he tried to run, but tripped over his own feet. Why did it have to be today? Why me? He thought, falling and spilling the bread and apple onto the sidewalk. Elias's fall not only attracted more attention, but also sparked a wave of laughter and murmurs among those watching the scene. The furious vendor grabbed Elias by the arm and lifted him up with ease, as if he were an empty sack. "You think you can steal here and get away with it, kid? Look at you, you don't even look like a person. I bet you don't even take baths," the man shouted, his face contorted with disdain. Some people in the crowd began to join in the humiliation, laughing loudly and making cruel comments. Must be another one of those vagrants who live on the streets, learning to steal from an early age. "I bet the mother doesn't even know who the father is," said a tall woman with a cynical smile. "I just wanted to eat. I just wanted to stop this hunger that's killing me," Elias muttered, trying to hold back the tears that were already threatening to fall. A group of teenagers, perhaps seizing the opportunity to feel superior, decided to take the cruelty to another level. One of them, carrying a plastic cup full of water, threw the liquid in Elias's face while the others laughed and encouraged him. "Look there, kid. You'll need a bath before thinking about coming back here," the boy mocked, earning applause and more laughter from the crowd. Elias, shivering from the cold and shame, tried to free himself from the vendor's hands, but his strengths were insufficient. "I didn't want to steal. I just wanted to eat. Why don't they understand that I had no choice?" he thought, feeling the humiliation burning more than the hunger. As if the water wasn't enough, someone from the crowd threw a piece of stale bread towards Elias, hitting his shoulder and falling to the ground. Others began to do the same, throwing food scraps while he tried to protect himself with his arms. Each piece that hit him seemed to weigh tons, not from the physical impact but from the weight of rejection and contempt they carried. "Is this what you want, kid? Food on the ground? Then take it and eat like the animal you are," shouted an older man, laughing loudly. Elias, already kneeling, held back his tears and looked at the food scattered on the floor. "Is this what I am to them? Someone who only deserves scraps and humiliation?" he thought, his heart tight. The crowd, increasingly animated by Elias's humiliation, seemed to have no limits. The laughter of a woman, loud and shrill, echoed above the others, as if the boy's suffering was the most entertaining spectacle she had ever witnessed. Not satisfied, she advanced to a nearby stall, grabbed a bucket full of water that was beside the vendor, and poured the contents over Elias's head with force, as if she wanted to erase him from existence. The impact of the cold water made him shudder, and he fell to his knees again, his frail hands trying in vain to cover his face. His worn clothes clung to his thin skeletal body, further exposing his fragility. His eyes, filled with tears mixed with the water streaming down his face, desperately sought any sign of compassion in the faces around him, but all he found were cruel smiles, looks of contempt, and no hand extended to help him. "Will no one help me? Do they all just want to see me suffer as if I were worthless trash?" he thought as his chest burned with a suffocating mixture of anger and sadness. "Please stop. I just wanted something to eat. I just wanted a chance not to starve to death. Elias cried out, his weak voice almost drowned out by the sound of collective laughter. Amid the screams, insults, and the cruel amusement that seemed to infect those present, Elias felt as if the world around him was closing in. He was no longer a boy. He had become a target, a joke, something people used to feel superior. Some threw pieces of rotten fruit in his direction, while others continued pouring water, laughing as if they wanted to erase him not only physically, but also emotionally, stripping him of any shred of dignity he might have had. The cold water ran down his skin, carrying not only the accumulated dirt from days on the streets, but also the hope he was struggling not to lose. Elias felt his muscles weaken, as if the weight of the contempt from those people was an unbearable burden. They can't see that I'm a boy. Can't they feel a shred of humanity? Is the heart of these people so dry that nothing can make them see what I feel? He thought, as a warm tear trickled between the cold drops that wet his face. I need to do something. But how will I get out of this if I'm alone? He asked himself in desperation. Little by little, even without strength, Elias realized he needed to react. He clenched his fists, his small fingers digging into his palms. He didn't have the physical strength to confront those people, but something in his chest screamed that he couldn't give up, couldn't let them destroy him completely. I can't stay here waiting for them to destroy me completely. I can't give them that victory over me. I need to get up and get out of here, even if it's the last thing I do, he thought, gathering courage while the insults and laughter continued to echo like a weight in his ears. His mind was a whirlwind, trying to find a way out, but his legs seemed unable to respond to the command. Every movement seemed like a superhuman effort, as if the ground beneath him was holding him down. Finally, with a trembling body, heavy clothes, and a face stained with water and tears, Elias gathered what little strength he had left and began to rise. His knees ached, his vision was blurred, but he knew he had to keep going. Ignoring the pieces of food that were still flying in his direction, he bent down and picked up the bread that had fallen to the ground. He wiped it on his soaked shirt, an instinctive gesture, and brought it to his mouth. The first bite was difficult, not because the bread was hard, but because his throat was tight with so much repressed emotion. As he chewed, he tasted the bitter flavor of dirt, mixed with the taste of bread, but it was more than he'd had in days. The gesture, however, did not bring silence. On the contrary, it was met with even more laughter and mockery from the crowd, as if his attempt to feed himself was an even bigger joke to them. "Look at him, he eats from the ground like the animal he is," someone shouted in the midst of the commotion, followed by guffaws. Elias, however, didn't care. Hunger was greater than pride, greater than shame, greater than any humiliation those people could inflict on him. Each bite he took of the bread was a silent declaration of resistance. He didn't look at anyone, but in his mind, he was shouting at those who humiliated him. "You can laugh, you can throw more things at me, but I won't give up. I'm stronger than this. I'm going to eat because I need to live, and one day I'm going to get out of this. One day I'm going to make you regret treating me like this." The words didn't come out of his mouth, but they were etched in his eyes, which now faced the crowd with a glint of determination. Elias didn't wait to see what else the crowd was willing to do. With the bread still clutched in his small hands, he used the rest of his strength to run away. His bare feet pounded hard against the uneven stones of the street as he walked away from the shouts and laughter that still echoed behind him. His heart was beating so fast that he could hardly breathe, and the cold night air that was falling burned in his lungs. He turned the first corner he found, then another, guided only by the desperate need to escape. "I can't stay still, I can't let them find me. They won't stop as long as I'm around," he thought, looking back one last time to make sure no one was following him. The streets were getting darker and darker, and Elias knew he needed to find a place to hide. The city was big, but for him, the options were limited. He needed a corner where he could disappear, at least until dawn. As he ran, an imposing mansion caught his attention. It was the largest house he had ever seen, with tall iron gates and a garden that seemed endless. He knew that place belonged to Millionaire Wesley, a man whose wealth was talked about all over town. "Will he see me? Will someone like him notice a boy like me?" he asked himself, hesitating for a moment. But there was no choice. Elias pushed the gate, which miraculously wasn't locked, and entered the garden, trying his best not to make a sound. The garden seemed like a maze. Tall trees and dense bushes surrounded it, casting shadows that made him shudder. Elias advanced slowly, stepping carefully so as not to break branches or leaves that would betray his presence. His eyes searched for any place where he could hide, but the garden seemed endless and devoid of shelters. Finally, he saw the side door of the house, a discreet entrance that was probably used by the employees. If I can get in unseen, I can find a corner to hide until tomorrow, he thought, feeling adrenaline speed up his heart again. He grasped the doorknob and to his surprise, the door opened without resistance. The chill of the night gave way to the stuffy warmth of the mansion's interior. As soon as he entered, Elias was overcome by a mixture of relief and fear. The house was as large inside as it seemed from the outside. A long corridor stretched ahead of him, illuminated only by a faint light coming from one of the rooms. The marble floor shone, reflecting the few rays of light, and the silence was almost absolute, broken only by the soft sound of his wet footsteps. He looked around for signs of life, but saw no one. Are they sleeping? Or maybe there's no one here, he thought, taking a deep breath to try and calm his nerves. I need to find a safe place quickly, before anyone sees me. Elias walked down the corridor with cautious steps, his stomach churning at every sound he heard. His gaze fell upon a large staircase that seemed to lead him to another floor of the mansion. He noticed that there was an empty space underneath it, shaded and sheltered, like a small cave inside that luxurious palace. Without a second thought, he ran over there and huddled up, trying to make as little noise as possible. The space was cramped and smelled of old wood, but offered the perfect hiding spot. No one will find me here. I just need to stay quiet and wait for the night to pass, he thought, hugging his knees and trying to ignore the cold he still felt in his damp clothes. The hunger that had led him to steal returned, but now it was accompanied by an overwhelming fatigue. Elias looked at the bread he still held and, without hesitation, took another bite. This time the taste seemed less bitter. At least I'm alive. At least I got something to eat, he thought, chewing slowly, trying to savor every piece as if it were the last. But his mind couldn't forget the looks and laughter of the crowd. Are all people like that? Is there no one who can see me as something more than a thief or a burden? He asked himself, feeling tears well up in his eyes again. Time seemed to pass slowly, each minute dragging as Elias remained hidden under the stairs. The silence of the house kept him on alert, but also gave him a false sense of security. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to imagine what it would be like to live in a place like this. If I had a house like this, I would never have to steal, I would never have to go hungry. Does the owner of this mansion know what it's like to have nothing? He thought, his chest tightening at the idea that the world was so unequal. But he knew those thoughts wouldn't help him now. I need to survive this night. That's all that matters, he murmured to himself, feeling fatigue begin to overtake him. Suddenly, Elias heard a distant sound. Footsteps. They were light, but clear enough to make him hold his breath. Someone was in the house, and they were probably not alone. The footsteps drew closer, and Elias huddled even tighter, trying to disappear into the shadow of the staircase. His heart was beating so fast that he feared the sound could be heard. If they find me, it's over. They won't believe me, they won't let me stay. And if they call the police? I don't want to go back to the streets now, not after everything, he thought. Clutching the bread to his chest as if it were a protective amulet, the footsteps passed through the corridor, but didn't stop near the stairs. Elias sighed in relief, but knew he was still not safe. He needed to think about what he would do in the morning, when the house would surely be busier. I can't stay here forever. I need to leave before they find out I came in, he thought, his mind struggling against fatigue and fear. But his body, exhausted from the day's events, was beginning to give way. He leaned his head against the wooden wall and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the distant sound of footsteps fade away. Tomorrow I'll figure out what to do. I just need to hold on until then, he thought, finally allowing himself to rest. The mansion seemed like an impossible refuge, a place that didn't match someone like Elias. Yet at that moment it was his only hope. As the silence of the night returned, he knew the worst could still happen. But for now, all he could do was wait and hope that the mansion's owner, the millionaire Wesley, would never notice his presence. If they find me, maybe this will be my chance to ask for help, or maybe it will be the end. I don't know, but I can't go back to the streets. Not now, thought Elias, feeling sleep finally taking over his body, as the mansion remained shrouded in a silent mystery. The dawn slowly invaded the mansion's corridors, casting elongated shadows through the windows. Wesley, the owner of the manor, descended the stairs with firm steps. The man, with graying hair and a serious look, carried an aura of authority, but also a peculiar curiosity. He had noticed something strange the night before. A side door that usually stayed locked had been left open. Upon reaching the foot of the stairs, he noticed a muffled sound, something between heavy breathing and a soft cry. His eyes fixed on the shadow under the staircase, and as he approached, he caught sight of a small, huddled figure. "What do we have here?" Wesley murmured, leaning in for a closer look. Wesley cautiously extended his hand and touched the shoulder of the sleeping boy. Elias awoke with a start, his eyes wide and his body trembling like a cornered animal. A scream escaped his mouth before he could contain it. He tried to move away, but he was trapped between the floor and the wall. "No, please, I didn't do anything wrong," Elias cried out, his voice thick with fear and despair. Wesley took a step back, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Calm down, boy. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to know what you're doing here." "You're safe now, but you need to explain to me what happened," Wesley said, his voice firm but gentle. Elias was still breathing heavily, but Wesley's tone seemed less threatening than he had imagined. Still, fear still gripped him. He couldn't find words to justify his presence there. His hands clutched the remains of the bread that had been left over from the night before, and tears began to stream down his dirty face. I just wanted a place to stay. I had nowhere to go. I swear I didn't steal anything," he said between sobs. Wesley tilted his head, observing the boy closely. "It seems you've been through some tough things, but you don't need to be afraid. Tell me, have you eaten anything today? Are you hungry?" he asked with an expression that mixed concern and curiosity. The mention of food made Elias's stomach growl loudly, a sound that echoed in the awkward silence of the room. He looked at Wesley hesitantly, unsure if he could trust that man. "I had a bit of the bread I took yesterday, but I'm still very hungry," Elias admitted, his voice almost a whisper. Wesley crossed his arms, pondering for a moment. "Come with me. I have something in the kitchen that could help you. It's not much, but it'll be better than what you're holding on to there," he said, pointing to the hardened piece of bread in Elias's hands. "If he's serious, then maybe I have a chance. But what if it's a trap?" The boy thought reluctantly as he slowly got up. Wesley began walking towards the kitchen, but noticed Elias was hesitating to follow him. He stopped and turned to the boy with an understanding look. "Look, I know it's hard to trust someone when you're in this situation, but if I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it already. You're safe here, and eating is the first thing you need right now," Wesley said firmly. Elias swallowed hard and took a hesitant step forward. If he wanted to hurt me, he would have done it already. But why is he being so kind? "No one is ever kind to me," Elias thought, still suspicious but following the man. When they reached the kitchen, Wesley opened the fridge and took out some leftover food that had been stored. He placed a plate with pieces of chicken and fresh bread on the table, along with a glass of milk. Elias looked at the food with wide eyes, as if he couldn't believe it was for him. "Sit down and eat. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in days," Wesley said, pulling out a chair for the boy. Elias sat down slowly, still afraid that it might be a trick. "This is really for me. It's not some trap to kick me out of here later?" Elias asked, his voice laden with uncertainty. Wesley let out a light laugh, shaking his head. "It's not a trap, boy. It's just food. You need this more than I do. Now eat before it gets cold," he said, crossing his arms and leaning against the counter. Elias picked up the piece of chicken with his hands and took the first bite. The flavor hit him like a shock, making tears stream down his face. He chewed slowly, savoring every bite as if it were a treasure. "It's been so long since I've eaten something like this. I don't even remember the last time," he thought, swallowing with difficulty as the lump in his throat began to dissolve. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. No one has ever done this for me before," Elias said, his voice choked with emotion. Wesley watched the boy eat in silence, trying to understand who this child was and how he had ended up in his house. Something in Elias's gaze awoke a sense of familiarity, as if he had seen that same desperation somewhere else before. "Do you have a family, boy? Someone who's looking for you now?" Wesley asked, his voice calm but firm. Elias stopped chewing and looked at the man, his eyes filled with sadness. "I don't have anyone. My mother died a while ago, and I never knew my father. Since then, I've been alone," he replied, his head bowed. "Is he really worried about me or just curious?" Elias thought as he tried to hide the pain in his voice. Wesley sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. He wasn't the kind of man who usually got involved in other people's problems, but there was something about Elias that moved him. "Well, you can't stay on the streets like this. I don't know what I'll do, but we'll figure something out," Wesley said with determination. Elias lifted his eyes, surprised. You want to help me? Why? No one ever wanted to before," he asked, not hiding his skepticism. Wesley shrugged, a slight smile appearing on his lips. "Maybe because you came into my house and now it's my problem. Or maybe because I see something in you that I can't ignore. Who knows?" Wesley responded, half joking but sincere. Elias finished eating and leaned back in his chair, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The food had comforted him, but his worries were still there, weighing on his small shoulders. Wesley watched the boy for a moment before speaking again. "You can rest here for now, but tomorrow we'll talk about what to do. I can't promise you much, but at least you'll have a roof for now," Wesley said, his voice firm but gentle. "Is he serious? Or will he change his mind tomorrow like everyone else?" Elias thought as a small thread of hope began to emerge in his heart. "Thank you. I really don't know what to say, just thank you," he said, almost voiceless. The kitchen fell silent again, and Wesley moved away to give Elias space, leaving the boy to absorb everything that had happened. Elias looked around, feeling the fatigue finally taking over his body once more. For the first time in a long time, he felt that maybe there was a chance for something to change. "If this is real, maybe I found something I've never had before. A chance to start over," Elias thought, as his eyes began to grow heavy and his mind surrendered to sleep, once again surrounded by the welcoming silence of that mansion, which, even unlikely, had become his refuge. The tranquility of dawn was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. Wesley's wife, Eliza, came down the stairs with her face still marked by interrupted sleep, her blonde hair disheveled falling over her shoulders. The woman, always impeccable in her attire and posture, wore a shimmering silk robe under the soft kitchen light. As she crossed the door, Eliza stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she found Elias sitting at the table. The boy, huddled in the chair, looked even smaller under the critical and severe gaze of the woman. "Wesley, what is this? Who is this child? What is he doing here?" Eliza asked, her voice rising quickly. Her indignation was palpable, almost suffocating. Wesley, who was leaning against the counter watching Elias, raised his hands in a calming gesture, but his wife's tone didn't leave room for immediate explanations. "Eliza, please, keep calm. I found the boy here. He was hungry and needed help. It's nothing like what you're thinking," Wesley said, trying to control the situation. Eliza took a step forward, her eyes glinting with fury as she addressed Elias directly. "You entered our home without permission. What do you think you're doing here, boy? Did you think you could simply invade and take advantage of our goodwill?" she shouted, with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just needed a place to stay," Elias responded, his voice trembling as he avoided the woman's gaze. Eliza's shout seemed to hit Elias like a physical blow. He hunched his shoulders, lowering his head even further. Wesley intervened quickly, placing himself between his wife and the boy. "Eliza, that's no way to speak to him. Look at the boy. He has no one. He was desperate." "We're not going to treat him like a criminal," Wesley said, his voice firmer now. But Eliza didn't give in. She crossed her arms, raising her chin in a defiant gesture. "Wesley, we can't simply welcome anyone who shows up at our house. He's a stranger, and you know nothing about him. How do you know he's not a thief or something worse?" she fired, completely ignoring Elias's dejected expression. "Why do people always think the worst of me? Will I never get a chance?" Elias thought, feeling the weight of the woman's words. Wesley took a deep breath, clearly frustrated, but refusing to lose his patience. He turned to Eliza, speaking with more determination. "I know enough to know that he's just a boy who needs help. Look at him, Eliza. He's afraid. He's no threat to anyone. We need to show compassion, not turn away someone who's already suffering," Wesley argued. Eliza narrowed her eyes, But before she could respond, Elias abruptly stood up. His eyes shining with tears he struggled to contain. "I don't want to cause any more trouble. If you don't want me here, I'll leave right now. I don't need anyone," he said, his voice choked with anger and sadness. The silence that followed was heavy, with Wesley and Eliza looking at the boy as he tried to hold back his tears. Wesley stepped forward, placing a hand on Elias's shoulder to calm him. "No one is kicking you out, Elias. You have every right to be here. Don't let harsh words make you think otherwise," he said, trying to sound comforting. But Eliza, still consumed by her indignation, let out a short, bitter laugh. "Harsh words? Wesley, are you kidding me? This boy invaded our home and you want me to treat him like a guest?" she retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. If he had good intentions, he wouldn't be hiding under the stairs like a rat. Elias could no longer hold back his tears. He sat down again, hugging his own knees while his breathing became panting. "I just wanted a place to stay. I just wanted to feel safe for once in my life," he mumbled, almost inaudible. Wesley shot a stern look at Eliza, his patience gnawing mentally at its limit. "Enough, Eliza. Look at what you're doing. This boy has been through things you can't even imagine." "He doesn't deserve to be treated like this," Wesley said, his voice now filled with authority. "Can't she understand that all I need is a little peace?" Elias thought, his mind confused between anger and sadness. Eliza took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure, but her gaze remained hard. "Wesley, you don't understand what you're doing. This isn't just about compassion. Bringing someone from outside into our home is risky. What if he lied? What if he's hiding something?" she insisted, her voice now more controlled but still full of mistrust. Wesley shook his head, exasperated. "What if he just needs a chance? What if he's a good person who never had an opportunity?" "I'd rather believe that than treat him like an enemy for no reason," he replied, staring at his wife firmly. Elias looked at the two of them, feeling small in the middle of that argument. He didn't know how to react. Part of him wanted to run away, but another smaller and more fragile part wanted to stay. "Is he serious? Can someone really believe in me?" the boy thought, as Wesley's words began to soften the weight on his chest. Eliza, sensing the tension in Wesley's shoulders, finally sighed and threw her hands up. "Do what you want, Wesley. But if this goes wrong, the responsibility is all yours," she said, before leaving the kitchen with quick and indignant steps. Silence took over the room again, and Elias looked at Wesley, uncertain about what would come next. Wesley sat down next to the boy, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry about her, Elias. Eliza has a difficult temper, but she'll end up understanding. For now, just rest. You're safe here," Wesley said with a slight smile. Elias nodded, still hesitant, but feeling that perhaps, for the first time, someone was really on his side. "Thank you. I'll never forget this," he muttered, as a small flame of hope began to ignite in his heart. A little later, when the sun was beginning to illuminate the mansion's living room, casting shy rays through the large windows, Elias was sitting on the huge leather couch, feeling small in the face of the grandeur of the furniture. The house seemed like a parallel universe, so different from the harsh and dirty streets where he lived. He was still holding the glass of milk Wesley had given him, trying to savor the rare moment of calm. "Is this real? Am I really going to have a chance to start over here?" he thought, his eyes wandering the walls decorated with paintings and bookshelves filled with books. However, that peace would not last long. A door opened in the hallway, and light but determined footsteps echoed across the marble floor. It was Nora, Wesley's daughter. The young woman, barely over 20, had long, well-groomed brown hair and an ever-stern, almost arrogant expression. She stopped when she saw Elias on the couch, frowning in a mixture of surprise and disgust. "What is this?" she asked, her voice laden with disbelief. She took a step forward, crossing her arms as she stared at the boy. "Who are you? And what are you doing in my house? Do you think you can just come in and act like you're part of the family?" she continued without waiting for an answer. I'm just here because your father said I could," Elias replied, his voice hesitant as his eyes desperately searched for an exit. Nora let out a dry laugh, shaking her head as if Elias's explanation was absurd. "My father? He would never do something like that. You must have tricked him, or he feels sorry for you, which makes no difference. You don't belong here," she said, her eyes flashing with contempt. Elias lowered his head, feeling the heat rise to his face. He didn't want to cause trouble, but it seemed to follow him wherever he went. "I'm not trying to take anyone's place. I just wanted to rest, that's all," he mumbled, almost inaudible. "Can't she understand that I have nowhere to go?" he thought, as he felt the weight of humiliation increase. But Nora was not willing to listen. She walked around the couch, approaching Elias with quick, firm steps. "Rest? Here? On the couch in my house? You're bold, I'll give you that. But don't worry, I'll take care of this now," she said, her voice sharp. Before Elias could react, Nora went to the kitchen and grabbed a broom that was leaning in the corner. She returned to the living room, holding the object as if it were a weapon, her face full of determination. "Get out of here now before I force you out, and don't you dare come back, or I'll call the police myself," Nora shouted, raising the broom in a threatening manner. Elias stood up quickly, his heart racing. "Why does this always happen to me? Why am I never accepted anywhere?" he thought, as he took hesitant steps backwards. However, before Nora could advance, a firm voice echoed through the room. "Nora, what are you doing?" Gus Wesley said, appearing in the hallway with a serious expression. He crossed his arms and looked directly at his daughter, who froze upon hearing her father. "Dad, what is this boy doing here? He shouldn't be here. He's just an intruder, a waiting problem to happen," Nora said, trying to justify her attitude. Wesley walked to the center of the room, positioning himself between Nora and Elias. He took the broom from his daughter's hands and set it aside with a calm but authoritative gesture. "This boy has a name, Nora. His name is Elias. And he's here because he needs help, something we could all offer if we were willing to see beyond prejudice," Wesley said, his voice laden with firmness. Nora huffed, throwing her hands up in frustration. "Prejudice? Dad, you don't even know who he is. He could be a thief, a liar, or something even worse. And now you want me to believe that he's just here because of help. That doesn't make sense," she said, raising her tone. Wesley took a deep breath, calmly controlling his own patience. "I know you have your reasons to be distrustful, Nora. But look at him. Do you really think he's a threat? He's just a boy, alone in the world, and all he's asking for is a chance. Are you so unable to see that?" Wesley countered with a serious look. Elias watched the exchange between the two, feeling more and more out of place. He wanted to say something, but his voice seemed stuck in his throat. Finally, he took a step forward, trying to get Wesley's attention. "Mr. Wesley, maybe she's right. I shouldn't be here. I can leave now, and no one will have to worry about me anymore," Elias said, trying to sound strong but failing as his voice wavered. Wesley looked at the boy, and then at Nora, his expression hardening even more. "No one is going anywhere. Elias is here because I decided to help him, and it's not you, Nora, who's going to change that. If you want to argue, you can argue with me, but he stays," Wesley said with an authority that silenced the room. Nora, clearly frustrated, shook her head in denial. "You're making a mistake, Dad. He's not your responsibility. And when this goes wrong, don't say I didn't warn you," she said before leaving the room, her quick steps echoing down the hallway. The ensuing silence was heavy, and Elias felt the weight of Nora's words hanging in the air. He looked at Wesley, uncertain of what to say. "Thank you for defending me. I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you," Elias said in an almost inaudible voice. Wesley placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and offered a reassuring smile. "I'm doing this because it's the right thing, Elias. And because sometimes all someone needs is a chance," he responded, as the silence of the house enveloped them once again. They felt estranged all day, but night fell and it seemed darker than ever as Elias remained seated on the couch, Nora's words still echoing in his mind. He looked at Wesley, who had returned upstairs, and felt the weight of gratitude mixed with the discomfort of being there. "I don't belong in this place. I'm just disrupting their lives. They have their own problems, and I don't want to be another one," he thought, gripping his hands around his knees. He knew Wesley had good intentions, but Nora's look and Eliza's words made it clear that not everyone shared that sentiment. Maybe it's better if I leave before things get worse," he muttered to himself, standing up carefully. The silence in the house was almost absolute as Elias walked to the side door he had entered the night before. He slowly opened the door, trying not to make noise, and took one last look inside the mansion. The warmth of the environment seemed inviting, but he knew he couldn't stay. Wesley was kind, but that's not enough. I don't want to cause any more trouble for him or for the family, he thought as he stepped out into the garden. The cold morning air immediately enveloped him, making him shiver. He pulled the thin shirt against his thin body, but the cold seemed to seep into his bones. I can deal with it. I've been alone before, and I'll survive again, he said to himself, trying to convince himself. Walking through the deserted streets, Elias felt the emptiness and loneliness weighing on his shoulders. He had no idea where to go, but he knew he needed to get as far away from the mansion as possible. The silence of the city was broken only by the sound of his footsteps echoing on the sidewalks. He hugged his arms around his body, trying to keep warm, but the feeling of being completely helpless was colder than the morning wind. I have nowhere to go. I don't know what's going to happen to me, but I can't go back there. They don't want me and I don't belong in that world, he thought, as he looked at the stars, as if seeking an answer. Suddenly, Elias heard the sound of an engine. A car was slowly coming towards him, the headlights illuminating the uneven stones of the street. He stopped, looking over his shoulder, but didn't recognize the vehicle. It was a black sedan with tinted windows preventing him from seeing who was inside. The car pulled up beside him, and the driver's window rolled down. A man with a severe face and cold eyes stared at him. "You're Elias, right?" the man asked, his voice firm and direct. Elias's heart raced and he instinctively took a step back. "Yes, that's me. Why?" he answered, his voice hesitant. "Is this some kind of help? Or have they found me for another reason?" he thought, feeling fear beginning to grow. The man got out of the car, followed by another who got out from the passenger side. Both wore dark clothes and had impassive expressions. "You know what we're talking about, boy. Your mother owed money and now we want what's ours." "It's that simple," said the first man, folding his arms. Elias felt the ground disappear from under his feet. I don't have anything. My mother died, and she didn't leave me anything." "I can't pay you," he replied, his voice breaking in despair. The two men exchanged malicious grins. "That's your problem, not ours. If you can't pay, you'll have to resolve it another way," said the second man, taking a threatening step towards Elias. Elias tried to back away, but his back was already against a building wall. He looked around for an escape, but the streets were deserted. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't even know my mother owed money. Why are you after me?" he cried, trying to hold back tears. The men laughed as if the boy's fear was just a spectacle for them. "You think that matters? Someone has to pay and you're all that's left," said the first man, before grabbing Elias's arm with force. "Let me go. I didn't do anything." "You have no right," Elias shouted, struggling uselessly. "They won't stop. This is the end for me," he thought, feeling the strength leave his body. The men pushed him towards the car as Elias tried to fight against the firm grip on his arms. He kicked and screamed, but the sound seemed to disappear into the void of the night. "No one will hear me. No one will help me. Why is this happening to me?" he thought, as tears streamed down his face. "Stay quiet, boy. The more you struggle, the worse it will be for you," said one of the men, opening the car door and throwing Elias into the back seat. The boy tried to get up, but the other man quickly got in and held him in place. "This isn't fair. I just wanted a chance to start over," he thought as the engine roared and the vehicle started to move. As the car accelerated through the deserted streets, Elias looked out the window, watching the city lights pass by rapidly. He felt despair growing inside him, but knew he couldn't give up. "I need to find a way to escape. I can't let this end like this," he thought, trying to control his breathing. He looked at the men, who were talking in low voices, and began to plan. "If I can distract one of them, maybe I can open the door and jump. But what if I get hurt? I don't know if I can run far enough," he thought, feeling adrenaline start to take over his body. The tension inside the car was almost unbearable. The men seemed unconcerned, as if they were just carrying out a routine task. But for Elias, every second was a battle against fear and despair. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather courage. "I'm going to survive this. Somehow I'll find a way out. No matter what happens, I won't give up," he thought, as the car disappeared into the darkness of the early morning, taking with it the fragile hope Elias had begun to build. Wesley was in the living room, lost in thoughts about how to help Elias feel more secure, when he heard the distant sound of a car accelerating. Something about the tone of the engine caught his attention. a different noise that seemed to cut through the silence of the early morning. He went to the window, and what he saw made him catch his breath. At the end of the street, he recognized the boy being pushed into a black car by two men. The headlights illuminated Elias's face for a brief second, showing the despair etched on his expression. "My God, they took the boy," Wesley muttered, feeling a wave of panic rise in his chest. He immediately grabbed the phone, his fingers trembling, to call the police. "I can't let this happen. I have to do something now," he thought, quickly dialing. Before he could complete the call, Eliza rushed down the stairs, drawn by Wesley's commotion. She was visibly irritated, her face still marked by the interrupted sleep. "What's going on now, Wesley? Why are you so agitated?" "Is this still about that boy?" she asked, folding her arms with a disdainful expression. Wesley turned to her, his eyes burning with determination and frustration. "Yes, Eliza. They took Elias. I saw it with my own eyes. He was kidnapped, and I need to do something before it's too late," he responded, raising his voice. "If I don't act now, I may never see him alive again," he thought, feeling the weight of responsibility. Eliza rolled her eyes, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're overreacting, Wesley. This boy is not our problem. He shouldn't even be here in the first place," she snapped, her voice cutting. Wesley felt anger rising within him, but he took a deep breath, trying to control himself. "Eliza, you don't understand. He's just a boy, and now he's in the hands of men who normalmente don't have good intentions. If you can't feel compassion, at least don't try to stop me from doing the right thing," he replied, pointing to the phone in his hand. "Why do you always put up barriers when all I want is to help someone?" Wesley thought, frustrated. Eliza, however, was not convinced. She advanced towards Wesley, trying to grab the phone from his hand. "You're not going to waste our time and resources on this, Wesley. This boy means nothing to us. And if you keep acting like this, you'll destroy this family," she shouted, her voice growing louder and louder. Wesley held the phone firmly, refusing to back down. "If saving a life will destroy this family, then maybe we need to rethink what it means to be a family," he retorted, staring intensely at Eliza. "I won't let your selfishness and indifference stop me from saving Elias." "I can't and I won't," he thought, as the confrontation reached its peak. The tension between them reached a critical point. Eliza, furious, tried to pull the phone again, but lost her balance and fell to the floor, hitting her head against the side table. Wesley stood still for a moment, shock taking over his body. He quickly knelt beside her, calling her name while checking if she was conscious. "Eliza, are you okay? Talk to me," he said, his voice trembling. But Eliza didn't answer. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow. Wesley felt panic take over as he looked at his unconscious wife. "I can't believe this is happening. Now I have to choose," he thought, feeling torn between saving Elias and taking care of Eliza. He stood up, trying to think clearly. The phone was still in his hand, and the police had not been called yet. He looked at Eliza again, guilt starting to settle in his heart. If I take her to the hospital now, Elias may not have a chance. But if I don't do anything, I may lose my wife. What do I do? He asked himself, feeling the overwhelming weight of the decision. He paced back and forth, alternately looking at the phone and Eliza. I can't lose either of them. But I also can't be in two places at the same time, he murmured, his eyes filling with tears. Finally, Wesley made a decision. He took a blanket from the couch and placed it over Eliza, adjusting her position to make sure she was comfortable. Then he called for an emergency, quickly explaining what had happened. My wife is unconscious but breathing. Send an ambulance now, he said, before hanging up and grabbing the car keys. He knew that every second counted for Elias, and he couldn't wait for help to arrive. Eliza will be fine, they'll take care of her. Now I need to save that boy before it's too late, he thought, as he walked out the door with determination. Wesley got into the car and sped through the streets, trying to remember the direction the black car had taken. He scanned every street with watchful eyes, looking for any sign that could lead him to Elias. His heart raced uncontrollably as he imagined what could be happening to the boy. Please let him be okay, let me find him in time, he thought, as he accelerated even more. The image of Elias's frightened face was still fresh in his mind, and he knew he couldn't fail. I promised I'd take care of him, and I won't break that promise, he muttered to himself as he turned another corner. As Wesley drove through the dark streets, his phone rang. It was the emergency service confirming that an ambulance was on its way to attend to Eliza. He quickly thanked them and hung up, refocusing his attention on the search. Eliza will be okay. Now Elias needs me. I just hope it's not too late, he thought, as he continued his relentless search. Finally, in the distance, he saw a black car parked in an alley. The engine was still running, and two silhouettes were visible outside. Wesley gripped the steering wheel tightly, preparing to act. "It's now or never. I'm not going to let them take him without a fight," he told himself as he parked the car and stepped out with his heart pounding. The silence of the night was broken as Wesley approached the alley, ready to face the men who had taken Elias. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but his determination was greater than his fear. "I promised to give this boy a chance, and no matter what it costs, I'm going to keep that promise," he thought as he drew closer, feeling the weight of responsibility with every step. Meanwhile, the house where they took Elias was old and gloomy, with windows covered by dusty curtains and a facade that seemed about to collapse. The black car came to an abrupt stop, and one of the men got out, opening the rear door where Elias was. He was pulled out unceremoniously, his arms still held in a firm grip. The boy tried to resist, but his strength was insignificant against the brutality of the men. "Please, let me go. I have nothing for you," Elias pleaded, but his words were ignored. "You talk too much, kid." "It's better to keep quiet before this gets worse for you," the man grumbled, pushing him towards the door of the house. "What are they going to do to me? This can't be happening," Elias thought as he was forced to enter the house. The interior of the house was as desolate as the exterior. The old furniture seemed to be from another era, and the musty smell permeated the air. The yellow and peeling walls gave the impression that the place had not seen a human touch for decades. Elias was taken to the main room, where a tall and imposing man was waiting for him. He had a cold expression and shadowy eyes that seemed to pierce his soul. His presence was intimidating, and the forced smile on his face only increased the discomfort. "So, this is the boy?" the man asked, his deep voice echoing through the room. The henchman nodded, pushing Elias forward. "Yes, sir, we got him exactly as you asked," one of them replied. "Who is this man? And what does he want with me?" Elias thought, feeling his heart race. The man took a step forward, approaching Elias. He crouched down to be at eye level with the boy and looked at him with a curious gaze. "You're smaller than I expected, but that doesn't matter. Now you're mine," he said, in a tone that mixed threat and possessiveness. Elias backed away, but was prevented by the firm grip of the henchman holding his shoulders. "Yours? What do you mean by that? I don't belong to anyone," Elias exclaimed, trying to sound brave despite the evident fear in his voice. The man laughed, a low and sinister sound that made Elias's blood run cold. "Ah, boy, you still don't understand. My name is Donovan, and I'm Eliza's brother. I've always wanted to have a son, and now you'll be mine." "Simple as that," he said, with a smile that seemed more like a threat. Elias felt the ground disappear from under his feet. Donovan's words echoed in his mind, each more absurd than the other. "Son? How can I be your son? This is insane," he shouted, trying to break free. Donovan slowly stood up, calmly adjusting his shirt cuffs with a frightening calm. "Insane? No, my boy. This is destiny. I never had a family, but now I have you. It doesn't matter what you think, that's not going to change. You're mine now, and we're going to start living as father and son," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I can't let this happen. I need to find a way out," Elias thought, feeling panic taking over. Donovan ordered the henchman to release Elias, and the boy fell to his knees on the floor. He looked around, desperately searching for an escape route, but the doors were locked and the windows were covered with iron bars. "You have nowhere to run, boy. So I suggest you stop resisting and accept your new life," Donovan said, crossing his arms as he watched him. Elias felt tears fill his eyes, but refused to let them fall. "I will never accept this. You can't just take me away from my life and force me to be something I'm not," he shouted, his voice filled with anger and despair. "If I don't fight now, I'll never get out of here," he thought, clenching his fists. Elias's reaction seemed to amuse Donovan, who gave another cold smile before turning to the henchman. "Give him a room. He needs time to understand his new reality," he said, as if he were talking about an object and not a person. Elias was dragged by the men to a small room at the back of the house. The room was empty, except for an old bed and a ragged blanket. They pushed him inside and locked the door behind him, leaving him alone in the darkness. Elias fell to the floor, his knees pulled against his chest as he tried to control the sob that threatened to escape. This can't be real. This can't be happening to me, he thought, feeling more lost than ever. Time passed slowly, and every second seemed an eternity. Elias heard footsteps outside and muffled voices, but couldn't distinguish what they were saying. He knew he needed to think of a plan, but his mind was so overwhelmed that he could barely form a coherent thought. I need to get out of here. No matter how, I can't stay in this place. But how will I do it alone? He thought, his mind struggling against fear. He looked through the small barred window, trying to catch a glimpse of the outside world. If only Wesley knew where I was. He would come save me. I'm sure of it, he murmured to himself, clinging to the blanket as if it were a lifeline. Donovan entered the room, his face serious, but with a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Elias with an almost paternal expression. You must be confused now, but that will pass. In time, you'll realize that this is the best thing that could have happened to you. I'm going to give you a life that no one else could offer, he said, his voice filled with a frightening conviction. Elias looked up, his hands gripping the blanket tightly. I don't want your life. I just want to go back to mine, he replied, his voice firm despite his fear. Donovan laughed again, shaking his head. Ah, boy. You still don't understand, but you will. There's nowhere to go back to. Now you're mine, he said, before getting up and leaving, locking the door once again. Alone again, Elias felt despair growing inside him. But along with it, a silent determination began to arise. He knew he couldn't give up. Not now. I'm going to get out of here. No matter how, I'll find a way. I'm not his son, and I never will be, he thought, his eyes shining with a mixture of fear and courage. As the house fell silent, Elias began to plan his escape, determined to fight for the freedom that seemed more and more distant. The door to the room creaked the next morning, and Donovan entered carrying a tray with coffee, bread, and fruit. His face was calm, almost friendly, but the tone still carried the same unsettling authority. He placed the tray on the small table beside the bed and sat again on the edge, watching Elias with eyes that mixed expectation and control. Good morning, boy. I thought you might be hungry. You know a good father always takes care of his son, said Donovan, with a tense smile that seemed more of a warning than a gesture of kindness. Elias looked at the tray, but his expression didn't change. He said nothing. I won't bow down to him, no matter what he does. I'm not what he wants, thought Elias, as he clenched his fists under the blanket. Donovan noticed the boy's silence and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You know, Elias, forming a bond takes time, but I have patience. We're both going to learn to be father and son because that's how it's going to be from now on, he said, with a firmness that didn't allow for contestation. Elias looked up, his expression loaded with contempt. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You're not my father, you'll never be, he replied, his voice laden with a surprising courage for his age. Donovan laughed, shaking his head. Ah, boy, you're more stubborn than I thought. But it won't last. Eventually you'll realize you have no choice, he said, rising with an authoritative air. The day passed slowly, and Donovan tried again to get closer to Elias, this time showing toys he had bought. He placed the objects on the floor of the room, as if he expected the boy to run and grab them. Look at this, Elias. I chose the best ones. I always wanted to give this to my son. Now they're yours, said Donovan, with an almost excited smile. But Elias remained motionless, looking at the toys as if they were traps. He crossed his arms, refusing to respond. Donovan stood still for a few seconds, the smile slowly fading from his face. You really want to play this game with me, boy? I'm trying to be good to you, but you're forcing me to be different, said Donovan, with a tone that was beginning to reveal irritation. Donovan rose abruptly, frustration evident in every movement. He paced back and forth in the small room, his gaze now charged with a mixture of anger and contempt. Do you think you're better than me? That you can defy me like this? Listen here, Elias. I've done more for you in one day than your mother did in years, said Donovan, his voice now loud and cutting. Elias looked up, finally reacting to the provocation. You know nothing about my mother. Don't you dare speak of her like that, he shouted, anger exploding in his words. Donovan stopped, a cold smile appearing on his lips. "Oh, but I do, boy. I know more than you can imagine," he replied, leaning down to look Elias in the eyes. Elias felt the ground disappear from under his feet once more. Donovan's words carried an insinuation he couldn't fully understand, but one that left him uneasy. "How do you know about my mother? What are you hiding?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Donovan crossed his arms, appraising the boy for a moment before responding. "I lent money to your mother. She was always desperate, always promising she would pay, but she never paid. So when she died, all the weight fell on you. It's as simple as that," he said, as if explaining something trivial. Elias felt tears well up in his eyes, but he held them back. "That's not true. My mother would never do something like that," he said, but his voice faltered with doubt. Before Donovan could respond, one of the henchmen entered the room, interrupting the moment. He seemed hesitant, almost nervous, as he addressed Donovan. "Sir, I received a call just now. Your sister, Eliza. She's been hospitalized. It seems it was something serious," the man said, his voice low and cautious. Donovan stood still for a moment, his face hardening. He rubbed his chin, clearly disturbed by the news. "Eliza, what happened to her? Speak properly," he demanded, his voice now charged with concern mixed with anger. The henchman hesitated before continuing. "It seems she had a collapse. She's in the hospital now. I don't have all the details," he replied, averting his gaze. Elias watched the scene in silence, his mind working quickly to process the information. "Eliza is in the hospital? Does Wesley know what's happening? Does this mean he's closer to finding me?" he thought, as he tried to control the emotion growing in his chest. Donovan seemed torn, his face a mask of confusion and frustration. He looked at Elias for a long moment before turning to the henchman. "Keep an eye on him. Don't let him out of this room. I'm going to sort this out," he said before hurriedly leaving the room in silence once again. Elias looked at the closed door, his mind buzzing with possibilities. If Eliza is in the hospital, that means Wesley is busy, but it also means they might be vulnerable. Maybe this is my chance to escape, he thought, as he looked around the room, trying to find something he could use for his escape. He knew time was of the essence, and that every minute Donovan spent away was an opportunity to change his fate. "I need to be quick. I need to find a way out of here before it's too late," he murmured to himself, as he began to act, determined to regain his freedom. Elias got up from the bed and began examining the room in search of something that could help him escape. The window was the only visible exit, but upon opening it he realized it was too high. The fall would be dangerous, perhaps fatal. He stepped back, frustrated, and began thinking of another solution. "If I try to jump, I could end up hurting myself and getting stuck here even longer," he thought as he paced back and forth in the room. He knew he needed to act quickly, but without making a mistake that would put him in further danger. "I need to find another way. If I can convince someone to help me, maybe I'll have a chance," he muttered, looking at the locked door. The opportunity arose when he heard footsteps outside. It was the henchman Donovan had left to watch over him. Elias approached the door and knocked lightly, getting the man's attention. "Hey, I need to talk to you, please, it's important," he said, trying to sound calm. The henchman hesitated for a moment, but eventually opened the door, staying at the entrance. "What do you want, kid?" Donovan was clear. "You're not going anywhere," the man said, crossing his arms. Elias took a deep breath, trying to control his anxiety. "I know he said that, but you don't have to do everything he tells you. You're not like him." "I can see that," Elias replied, using all his courage to continue. "If I can get him to listen to me, maybe I'll have a chance," he thought. The henchman seemed surprised by Elias's words and relaxed his posture slightly. "And what do you think I can do for you, huh?" "If I let you go, Donovan will kill me," he said, sounding doubtful. Elias took a step forward, keeping his gaze fixed on the man. "And what if he doesn't find out? I just want to leave. I won't tell anything, I promise." "Please, I just want my freedom," Elias said, his voice charged with sincerity. The henchman scratched his head, clearly torn. "I don't know. This could go really wrong for me," he muttered, but his eyes showed that he was considering the idea. "If I can touch his heart, maybe he'll help me," Elias thought, waiting for an answer. After a few seconds of silence, the henchman sighed deeply. "All right, kid, but if you get caught, it's on you. And never say I helped you, understood?" he said, opening the door fully. Elias nodded with evident relief on his face. "Thank you. I'll never forget this. You're giving me a chance to live," he replied, his voice firm. The man gestured for Elias to hurry out and pointed in the direction of a side exit. "Go that way, be quick and don't look back," he said, before closing the door behind him. Elias ran, his heart racing, feeling that he finally had a chance to escape. "Now is my opportunity. I can't waste it," he thought as he ran away from the house. After escaping, Elias wandered the streets until he found a sign pointing toward the hospital. He followed the directions, driven by curiosity about what was happening with Eliza, even though she hated him. Upon arriving at the hospital, the environment seemed cold and impersonal. He went in and headed straight to the reception, where an attendant looked at him with disdain. "What do you want here, kid? This is no place for you," she said rudely. Elias tried to explain. "I just want to know how Eliza is. Please, it's important," he said. But the attendant rolled her eyes. "Eliza? You shouldn't even know who she is." "Get out of here before I call security," she replied, cutting off any attempt at dialogue. Discouraged, Elias took a few steps back, but his determination wouldn't let him give up. He decided to try another approach and went up to a doctor passing by in the hallway. "Doctor, please, I need to know about Eliza." "It's urgent," he said in a pleading tone. The doctor looked at him impatiently and replied coldly, "I don't have time to waste with children wandering around the hospital. Go home and let the adults take care of this," he said before hurrying away. Elias stood there, feeling the weight of humiliation, but refused to leave without answers. "I need to know what's going on. I can't just walk away," he thought, looking around for another opportunity. Determined to act more discreetly, Elias began exploring the hospital, avoiding the gazes of nurses and doctors. He found a quieter hallway and followed it, overhearing voices coming from a partially open room. He approached carefully, positioning himself next to the door to listen without being seen. The voices were muffled, but they were clearly discussing something important. He recognized Eliza's name and heard words that made his heart race. "They're talking about her. But what does this mean? Does this change everything?" he thought, trying to absorb what he was hearing. He couldn't believe what he had just discovered, but knew it wasn't the time to act. Feeling confused and overwhelmed, Elias silently retreated, trying to process the information he had overheard. He knew what he had discovered was important, but he didn't fully understand the impact of it yet. "I need to find out more. But for now I need to think about how to use this to protect myself," he thought, as he walked away from the hospital, blending into the crowd that was starting to fill the hallways. He knew this new information could change everything, but he also knew he was alone in this fight. "I won't give up. No matter what happens, I'll find a way to survive," he told himself as he disappeared into the afternoon of that day. Elias ran through the streets, his mind still trying to organize the information he had heard at the hospital. The words about Eliza echoed like a persistent echo, but he knew he couldn't be distracted. His legs were already tired, and his empty stomach was starting to protest. He looked around for a safe place to hide for a moment, but the sudden noise of a speeding car made him freeze in place. The headlights blinded him, and he instinctively raised his arms, shouting, "Stop, stop, please!" The car braked sharply, the tires singing on the asphalt. When Elias opened his eyes, he saw Wesley getting out of the vehicle, his face a mixture of relief and surprise. "Elias, my God, boy, are you okay? What are you doing here?" Wesley asked, running up to him and holding him by the shoulders. Elias was still breathing heavily, but his heart calmed down as he saw the familiar face. I was trying to find out about Eliza, and about you. Wesley, I need to talk to you, but first—" "Thank you for finding me," said Elias, his voice trembling but full of sincerity. Wesley squeezed the boy's shoulder, clearly relieved to see him. "Come, get in the car. You shouldn't be out on the street alone." "Let's go home and you'll tell me everything," said Wesley, guiding Elias to the passenger seat. "Finally, someone who can hear me. Maybe this will change everything," thought Elias as he settled into the car. Back at the mansion, Wesley helped Elias inside and had him sit on the couch. He brought him a glass of water and stood waiting for the boy to speak. Elias took a sip and took a deep breath before starting. "Wesley, I went to the hospital. They were talking about Eliza. I heard things you need to know," he said, looking directly at the man. Wesley frowned, his expression of concern growing. "Eliza? What about my wife?" "Speak, Elias. What did you hear?" he asked, his voice urgent. Elias hesitated, but knew he couldn't keep it to himself. "They said she has cancer. I don't know the details, but that's what I heard." "Wesley, I'm so sorry," Elias revealed, his voice soft but laden with sorrow. The news hit Wesley like a punch in the stomach. He stumbled back and fell into an armchair, putting his hands over his face. "Cancer? It can't be. She never told me anything. Why would she hide something like that?" he mumbled, his voice full of disbelief. Elias watched him, feeling a mixture of guilt and compassion. "Wesley, maybe she was trying to protect you. I don't know why, but I thought you needed to know," Elias said, trying to comfort him. Wesley shook his head, still trying to process the information. "Eliza, my Eliza. Why didn't she trust me to face this together?" he thought, feeling a deep ache in his chest. Wesley stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth across the room. He seemed lost in his thoughts, but his determination began to emerge. "I need to go to the hospital. I need to talk to her and find out the truth. This can't stay like this," he said, as if speaking to himself. Elias looked at him, unsure of how to help. "I'll go with you, Wesley. I don't want you to face this alone," Elias offered, his voice full of sincerity. Wesley stopped and looked at the boy, touched by his concern. "Thank you, Elias. But first I need to recompose myself. I can't go in like this," he said, trying to stay calm. As Wesley tried to organize his thoughts, he decided to go to the kitchen for a glass of water and take a deep breath. When he returned to the living room, he found Nora lying on the floor, her skin pale and her body motionless. "Nora! No!" Wesley shouted, running to his daughter and kneeling beside her. He touched her face, trying to wake her up. "Nora, talk to me. What happened?" he said, his voice filled with panic. Elias ran over to them, his eyes wide with concern. "Wesley, is she breathing? What can we do?" Elias asked, trying to help. Wesley checked Nora's breathing and realized it was weak but present. "She's alive but barely. I need to take her to the hospital now," he said, carefully lifting her up. Elias helped open the door as Wesley carried Nora to the car. During the journey, the silence in the vehicle was deafening. Wesley drove with a tense face, his mind divided between worry for Eliza and now for Nora. "What's happening to my family? Why is everything falling apart at once?" he thought, feeling the pressure mounting. Elias, sitting in the back seat, looked at Nora, hoping she would recover. "Wesley, she's going to be okay. We have to believe that," Elias said, trying to bring some comfort. Wesley didn't respond, but gripped the steering wheel tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping him in control. Arriving at the hospital, Wesley rushed in with Nora in his arms, shouting for help. Nurses ran to assist and took Nora into an emergency room. Wesley stood in the hallway, staring at the door that closed in front of him. Elias approached and touched his arm. "Wesley, we'll find answers. I know it seems impossible now, but we'll get through this," he said, his voice firm. Wesley looked at the boy, his eyes filled with unshed tears. "I just want my family back, Elias. I want everything to be okay again," he replied as the two waited for news, trapped in a tension that seemed endless. The clock on the hospital wall seemed to be frozen as Wesley and Elias awaited news. Each minute dragged on, and the tension in the air was almost palpable. Wesley, with his elbows resting on his knees, repeatedly ran his hands over his face, as if trying to ward off darker thoughts. Elias, seated beside him, looked at him with concern but didn't know what to say. The silence was broken when a doctor appeared in the hallway, his expression grim. "Mr. Wesley, we need to talk about your wife and daughter. The condition of both is serious," he said, looking at the two of them. Wesley stood up immediately, feeling his heart tighten. "What's happening? Will they be okay?" he asked, his voice full of anxiety. "Please don't let this be another bad news," he thought, as he clenched his hands. The doctor sighed, indicating that the conversation would be difficult. "Your wife, Eliza, needs to undergo a high-risk surgery. The cancer has spread faster than we expected, and this is our only chance to save her life," he explained in a careful tone. Wesley felt his legs go weak, but forced himself to stay standing. "And what about my daughter? And Nora?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. The doctor paused before answering. "Your daughter has been poisoned. The substance is causing organ damage, but we don't yet know the origin or exact type. We're stabilizing her, but we need to investigate further to treat her properly, he said. Poisoned? How did this happen? Who would do something like this to my family? Wesley thought, feeling a mix of anger and despair. Elias watched it all in silence, but inside he was equally shaken. He placed a hand on Wesley's arm, trying to offer support. Wesley, this is a lot, but we need to stay strong. Nora and Eliza need you now more than ever, Elias said, his voice firm but with a touch of gentleness. Wesley looked at the boy, finding a brief moment of comfort in his words. You're right, Elias. I need to be here for them. I can't let this take me down, he replied with determination. However, his heart was heavy with the decisions he would need to make. How will I save them both? I'm losing everything I love, he thought as he sat back down. After long minutes of reflection, Wesley made a decision. He stood up and looked at Elias. I need to go home for a moment. There are things I need to get and organize. Can you stay here and let me know if anything changes? He asked with a serious expression. Elias nodded, understanding the importance of the task. Leave it to me, Wesley. I'll take care of things here. Just come back quickly, he said, trying to sound confident. Wesley gave a slight nod before leaving. His steps hurried as his mind raced with worries. If my home is the only place where I can find answers, I need to check everything, he thought as he drove toward the mansion. Upon arriving at the house, Wesley noticed something strange. The gate was ajar, the lock hanging carelessly. He got out of the car cautiously, feeling a chill run down his spine. As he pushed open the front door, the sight he found was devastating. The living room was completely wrecked. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, and personal belongings scattered across the floor. He advanced slowly, his heart pounding. What happened here? Who did this? He muttered, as his eyes scanned the chaos. Every room he checked brought more destruction, and the emotional impact grew with each discovery. My home, everything I built, destroyed in one night, he thought, fighting back tears. Wesley entered the study, where he kept important documents. The drawers were open and papers covered the floor. He frantically searched through the debris, trying to check if anything valuable had been taken. His search was interrupted by an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. Whoever did this knew what they were looking for. This wasn't a common robbery, he thought, trying to understand what could have motivated such an attack. He picked up the phone and called Elias, his voice shaking with emotion. Elias, the house, it's destroyed. Everything's been stolen. I don't know what to do, he said, trying to contain his despair. Wesley, come back to the hospital. They need you here. Leave this for later, Elias responded, with a surprising firmness for someone so young. Wesley closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather strength. He knew Elias was right. There was nothing more that could be done at the house at that moment. You're right, Elias. This can wait. Now my priority is Nora and Eliza, he said as he stood up and headed for the exit. He paused for a moment at the door, looking at the destruction one last time. Everything I've lost here is material. What really matters is at the hospital, he thought, trying to convince himself that there was still hope. Wesley walked through the wrecked house, his mind still trying to process the chaos around him. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as he recalled the happy moments his family had spent there. All of this, it's more than just a robbery. This is a direct attack, he thought, his heart tightening at the idea that something bigger was happening. He was about to leave when he heard footsteps behind him. His body went rigid, and he turned slowly only to find Donovan standing in the middle of the room, a cold smile on his face. Wesley, good that you're back. I was waiting for you, said Donovan, with a tone of voice that mixed irony and threat. Wesley narrowed his eyes, feeling the blood boil in his veins. What are you doing here, Donovan? Haven't you caused enough damage? He asked, his voice laden with contained anger. Donovan took a few steps forward, ignoring the tension in the air. Wesley, don't be so dramatic. I still have matters to settle with you, matters that can't wait, he replied, as he pulled a folder from under his arm and placed it on the overturned table. Wesley crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on Donovan. I don't want anything with you, Donovan. I already know it was you who poisoned Nora. Do you think I'm going to fall for any of your games after that? He fired off, his voice firm. Donovan smiled, leaning slightly forward. Yes, it was me. And I would do it again if it meant getting what I want. You don't understand, Wesley, but you're out of options. It's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of survival, he said, pulling up a chair to sit down, as if he were completely in control of the situation. What is he planning now? And why does he always seem to be one step ahead? Thought Wesley, struggling to remain calm. I'll be direct, Wesley. You're going to transfer everything into my name, the house, the businesses, everything. And you're going to do it now, without questioning, said Donovan, opening the folder and revealing documents already prepared. Wesley gave a dry laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. You're crazier than I thought. Why would I do something like that? To satisfy your greed? Never, he responded, his voice laden with contempt. Donovan rose slowly, putting his hands in his coat pockets. Oh, but you will, because if you don't, Nora won't be the last. You'll be next. And I promise it will be much more painful, he said, threatening her. Wesley felt the anger take over, but tried to stay in control. You think you can force me to do this? Poisoning my daughter was already going too far, Donovan. I won't bow to you, he said, staring the man down with determination. Donovan took a step forward, now closer to Wesley. You really think you have a choice? Nora was just the beginning. If you don't do what I'm asking, Elias will also be on my list. And before you ask, yes, he will be my son. Legally, adopted. I'll raise the boy the way I think he should be raised, he said, in a tone that made Wesley shudder. Elias? The mention of the boy's name made Wesley feel a knot in his stomach. Elias has nothing to do with this. Why are you involving him? He's not part of your dirty game, Donovan, he said, trying to understand what the man wanted. Donovan smiled again, now darker. He's the final piece of my plan, Wesley. An heir. Something you won't have anymore, because your family is crumbling. And he will be mine, whether you like it or not, he replied, as if announcing a victory. How can he be so obsessed with something like that? It doesn't make sense, thought Wesley, feeling the weight of the situation. Donovan then put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at Wesley. Enough talk. Sign the documents, or it all ends here and now, he said, his voice now cold and emotionless. Wesley froze, feeling the real danger for the first time. He looked at the gun and then at Donovan, trying to find a way out. Are you willing to kill for this? Is this how much you care about power? He asked, trying to buy time. Donovan tilted his head as if considering the question. It's not power, Wesley, it's control, and I always get what I want, he replied, gripping the gun tighter. Wesley knew he was at a crossroads, one of those situations where any choice could mean the end of everything he held most dear. Signing the papers was a sentence of defeat. It meant handing over his entire life into Donovan's hands and watching helplessly as his family continued to be the target of manipulations. On the other hand, refusing could cost something even more valuable, the safety of Elias, Nora, and Eliza. The weight of the decision seemed to crush him, but he knew he couldn't let himself be overwhelmed. He wants to break me, make me give in out of fear. But if I give in, who will protect them? Thought Wesley, as he struggled against the wave of panic that threatened to consume him. Wesley raised his eyes to Donovan, trying to keep his voice steady despite the tension tightening his chest. If I sign, will you leave my family alone? Will you stop this? Asked Wesley, the words coming out with difficulty. He knew Donovan's promise would be empty, but he needed to keep him talking, needed time to find a way out. Donovan smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Wesley. Once everything is mine, I won't have any more reasons to worry about you, he replied in a tone so calm it was almost more threatening than shouting. Wesley clenched his fists, anger burning inside him. He's lying. It's obvious. But how can I protect them if I'm dead? Thought Wesley, desperately trying to buy time. The air in the room seemed heavier with each passing second, and Wesley felt the sweat dripping down his forehead as he tried to think of a plan. He looked around discreetly, his eyes searching for something, anything that he could use as a weapon or distraction. At the same time, he needed to keep Donovan talking, distracted enough for his attention to waver. Donovan, you can have everything you want, but destroying my family will never fill the void you feel. This isn't about me. It's about you, about what you've lost, Wesley said, trying to strike a weak point. Donovan paused for a moment, frowning, but his expression soon hardened again. Enough philosophy, Wesley. Sign the papers, or we end this here, he replied, his patience visibly wearing thin. The pressure in the room was suffocating, and Wesley knew time was against him. Every second was a dangerous dance between gaining an opportunity and provoking Donovan to the point where he'd pull the trigger. He realized he couldn't trust Donovan's words, but also knew that acting recklessly could ruin everything. "Are you willing to end my life, to ruin everything I've built, just to have more power? This isn't control, Donovan. This is destruction, and it will end up destroying you too," Wesley said, trying to force him to reflect. Donovan laughed, but there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes. "You talk as if you have a choice, Wesley. The difference between us is that I always get what I want, and you're about to give me exactly that," he replied, gripping the gun more tightly. Wesley felt his heart racing, but forced himself to breathe deeply, to maintain focus. "If this is the end, I won't let him win so easily," he thought, quickly analyzing his options. He knew he needed to be strategic, needed a moment of distraction, a crack to turn the game around. He noticed a small vase on a nearby table, something he could use to disarm Donovan if he had the chance. But the distance was too great, and any sudden movement could be fatal. Wesley closed his eyes for a brief moment, trying to gather all the courage he had. "I can't lose my family to him, not today. Not like this," he thought, as he prepared to act. Donovan noticed the prolonged silence and leaned forward, pointing the gun directly at Wesley. "Come on, Wesley. Sign the papers. I'm running out of patience, and you're running out of options," he said, his voice lower, but laden with threat. Wesley knew every second increased the risk, but he also knew he needed to take a chance. "You think this is power, Donovan? Pointing a gun at someone and forcing them to do what you want. This doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. Because deep down you know you'll never have anyone's respect or loyalty," Wesley said, his voice steady, but full of scorn. Donovan narrowed his eyes, visibly irritated. "Enough, Wesley. My patience is gone." "Sign or die," he replied, his finger starting to press the trigger. Wesley felt the weight of the words, but he also realized that was the moment. Donovan's anger made him more unstable, more vulnerable to making a mistake. He needed to act now while he still had a chance. At the hospital, Nora opened her eyes suddenly, breathing irregularly. The bright white light of the room seemed to dazzle her vision, and the sound of the monitors around her only added to her disorientation. She felt a pressure in her chest, as if the very air was too heavy to inhale. When she tried to move, a sharp pain shot through her body, but that wasn't what made her tremble. It was the memory of something terrible. It was him!" Nora shouted, her voice hoarse, but carrying an unexpected strength. The nurses rushed to calm her down, holding her arms as she thrashed. "My uncle! He poisoned me! Donovan! It was him!" she continued, tears streaming down her face. Nora's words echoed through the room, and the desperation in her voice made everyone stop for a moment, trying to understand what she was saying. One of the nurses held her hands firmly, trying to convey calm. "Nora, please, breathe. You're safe now, we'll take care of you," she said. But Nora shook her head frantically, as if refusing to accept any attempt at comfort. "You don't understand. He'll hurt more people. He won't stop until he destroys everything," she screamed, the anguish in her voice turning the air in the room into pure tension. "I can't just stand by while he does this to my family," Nora thought, even with her weak body. Outside, Elias heard the screams and felt his heart racing. He ran to the door but was stopped by one of the nurses, who prevented him from entering. "You can't go in now, boy. She's unstable," the woman said, trying to be firm, but not unkind. Elias, however, didn't give up. "Please, I need to see Nora." "I need to know what's going on," he said, with a determination that contrasted with his young age. He stood motionless in the hallway for a few seconds, but Nora's words echoed in his mind like a warning. Donovan. It was him. He's the one behind all of this, Elias thought, feeling anger and indignation growing within him. Elias knew he couldn't stay there. He needed to act. If Nora is right, then Wesley is in danger. Donovan won't stop until he gets what he wants, he thought, as he ran through the hospital corridors, ignoring the confused looks from the staff. He knew he couldn't ask for help directly. No one would believe him, but his intuition told him he needed to go to Wesley's house. "He's there, I know he is, and if Wesley is alone, he'll need me," he muttered to himself as he hurried out of the hospital and took the path he knew so well. Night had already fallen when Elias arrived at Wesley's house. The gate was ajar, making his heart race even faster. He entered carefully, trying not to make a sound, and stopped as he approached the main room. The scene before him made him freeze. Donovan was standing, holding a gun pointed directly at Wesley. The two seemed locked in a silent battle where every word carried the weight of a veiled threat. "Sign the papers, Wesley." "This ends here now," said Donovan, his voice cold and cutting. Wesley, however, kept a firm stance. "If you think I'll give in, you're mistaken." "You can threaten me, Donovan, but you can't break me," he replied, with a strength that surprised even himself. Elias hid behind a nearby wall, his heart beating so loudly that he feared Donovan might hear it. He clenched his fists, trying to decide what to do. "If I go in there, he might see me and shoot, but if I do nothing, Wesley could die," he thought, as he struggled against the fear that paralyzed him. He looked around, searching for something he could use as a weapon, but the place was empty, except for the debris already covering the floor. "I need to be smart. I need to think of something that could distract him," he thought, his mind working frantically for a solution. Donovan took a step forward, moving closer to Wesley with the gun still aimed. "You think this is a game, Wesley? There's no victory for you here. Either you sign those papers now or everything you love will disappear, one person at a time," he said, his tone dripping with threat. Wesley narrowed his eyes, feeling the pressure build but refused to show weakness. "You don't understand, Donovan. What I have can't be taken with a signature." "My family isn't something you can destroy," he replied, his voice firm, even with the gun just a few meters from his face. On the other side of the room, Elias watched every move, every word, as he tried to gather the courage to act. "If I go in now, I could end up making things worse. But if I wait too long, it might be too late," he thought, as his eyes returned to the gun in Donovan's hands. He knew he couldn't face Donovan directly, but he needed to find a way to divert his attention. Maybe a noise, some distraction that would make him turn around, he thought, as his eyes scanned the room for something he could use. Donovan took another step, now so close to Wesley that the tension between them seemed palpable. "Last chance, Wesley. Sign or prepare for the worst," he said, his voice low but lethal. Wesley didn't avert his gaze, remaining steadfast despite the imminent danger. "I won't give in. If this means the end, then so be it. But you'll never have what you want," Wesley replied, his voice charged with conviction. "If he's willing to fight until the end, then I must be too," thought Elias, as he felt courage growing within him. He knew he didn't have much time, but he was determined to act. After all, Wesley's life, and perhaps his own, depended on it. Hidden in the shadows, Elias shifted nervously, watching Donovan and Wesley. The scene before him was unbearable, and he knew he couldn't stand idly by any longer. It was then that his eyes caught something in the distance. Donovan's car parked with the door ajar, visible through a broken window. His car. The key might be there. If I can do something with the car, I can distract him. But will I have time? Elias thought as adrenaline coursed through his body. He knew it was an enormous risk, but he saw no other way out. "I have to do this. It's the only way to help him," he muttered, before leaving his hiding spot with quick, silent steps. Elias approached the car with his heart racing. He looked around, making sure no one had noticed him, and opened the driver's door. The key was in the ignition just as he'd hoped. He got in quickly, his trembling hands gripping the steering wheel. "I've never driven a car before. Will I be able to? I have no choice. Wesley needs me," he thought, trying to muster courage. With a deep sigh, he turned the key, and the engine roared to life. The sound echoed across the property, catching Donovan and Wesley's attention. "What was that?" Donovan shouted, turning his head toward the noise, but not lowering his gun. Elias wasted no time. He put the car in gear, pressed the accelerator with all his might, and drove straight toward the house entrance. The vehicle advanced quickly, its headlights illuminating the debris scattered across the floor. When the car collided with the front of the house, the impact was devastating. The wooden door and wall frame shattered with a deafening crash. Donovan and Wesley fell to the ground from the impact as pieces of rubble flew everywhere. "What have I done? I hope they're okay," thought Elias, still in the driver's seat, his breathing heavy and uneven. Wesley was the first to get up, coughing because of the dust. He looked at the car and saw Elias behind the wheel, the boy's eyes wide and full of tears. "Elias, what did you do, boy?" Wesley shouted, his voice laced with surprise and concern. Before he could say anything else, Donovan also got up, his face taken over by anger. He held the gun firmly, now pointing it at the car. "Are you crazy, boy? Get out of there before I teach you a lesson," Donovan shouted, walking towards the vehicle. "He's going to shoot me. I shouldn't have done this," Elias thought as tears streamed down his face. Elias slowly opened the car door, hands raised. "I just wanted to help. I saw what was happening and I thought this would make him stop," said Elias, his voice trembling with the weight of fear and guilt. Donovan laughed, but the sound was cold and threatening. "Help? Here's that how you help, by destroying everything? You're lucky I like you, boy. You'll make a great son for me, even with those stupid ideas," Donovan said, lowering the gun slightly but maintaining control of the situation. Elias sobbed, not knowing how to respond. "I don't want to be your son. I just want this to end," he thought, feeling more helpless than ever. Wesley, still on the ground, observed the interaction, trying to think of a way to disarm Donovan without putting Elias in further danger. "Leave the boy out of this, Donovan. He's just a child. If you want someone to take your anger out on, take it out on me," Wesley said, getting up with difficulty. Donovan turned to him, his cold smile disappearing. "You always think you're the hero, don't you, Wesley? But this isn't a story of heroes and villains. It's a story of survival, and I always survive," Donovan responded, his voice full of bitterness. "If I don't do something now, he'll end up hurting Elias too," Wesley thought, feeling the urgency of the situation increase. Elias looked at Wesley, his eyes full of guilt and fear. "I just wanted you to be safe, Wesley. I just wanted him to stop," Elias said, his voice almost a whisper. Donovan turned his attention back to the boy, the expression on his face changing to something that seemed almost paternal. "And you did what you thought was right, boy. That's why I know you'll make a great son. With me, you'll learn to be strong, to never hesitate," Donovan said, as if trying to convince Elias that he was on his side. "I'll never be like him." "Never," Elias thought, feeling a spark of resistance grow within him. Donovan took another step towards the car, his gun still aimed, now alternating between Elias and Wesley. "Let's end this once and for all. Wesley, sign the papers and leave the boy with me. It's simple. There doesn't have to be any more destruction," he said, his voice now more controlled, but still full of threat. Wesley looked at Elias, then at Donovan, and finally at the papers on the ground. "You really think this is going to give you the control you want so badly, Donovan? You're mistaken. And if you think I'm going to let you take Elias, you're even more wrong," Wesley responded, his voice firm but laced with emotion. The tension in the room was suffocating, and every movement seemed to bring the situation closer to a collapse. Elias knew he needed to do something, but his hands were trembling and his mind was in conflict. "I can't let Wesley face this alone. But what can I do against Donovan? He has a gun," he thought, as his eyes desperately searched for a solution. "I just want this to end," he muttered, feeling the tears fall again. And as the night wore on, the battle between courage and fear raged within him, even as the confrontation in the room reached its inevitable climax. Donovan seemed bewildered, his gaze divided between the gun in his hand and the boy staring at him with pleading eyes. "A hug?" he repeated, the disbelief evident in his tone. He hesitated, taking a step back, but soon shook his head as if he had decided something. "All right, boy, if that's what you want, I'll give you a hug. Maybe then you'll understand that I'm on your side," said Donovan, slightly lowering the gun. Wesley observed the scene with wide eyes, fearing what could happen but lacking the courage to intervene. "Elias, what are you doing?" Wesley thought, unable to believe what he was seeing. Donovan slowly approached Elias, still holding the gun, but with his other hand extended. The boy took a step forward, his body trembling, but his determination evident. When Donovan leaned in to hug him, Elias acted quickly. In an instinctive movement, he grabbed Donovan's wrist, twisting it with all his might. The gun fell to the ground with a dull sound, sliding away. Donovan screamed in pain, but before he could react, Elias quickly stepped back. Wesley, still in shock over what had just happened, ran to grab the gun. "I can't believe he did it! Elias really did it!" Wesley thought, as he grabbed the gun and pointed it at Donovan. Donovan retreated, holding his injured wrist, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. You "You're going to regret this, boy," he shouted, but his voice now sounded less threatening and more desperate. Wesley, with the gun in hand, took a step forward, positioning himself between Donovan and Elias. "That's enough, Donovan. The game is over. You're not going to hurt anyone," said Wesley, his voice firm. He took his phone out of his pocket with his other hand and quickly dialed the police, not taking his eyes off Donovan. "Yes, I'm at my house. An armed man tried to force me to sign documents under threat." "He's still here, but he's unarmed," said Wesley, his voice calm but full of authority. Elias remained motionless, watching everything with wide eyes. He felt his heart pounding, but also a wave of relief. "I did it. I really did help," he thought, still trying to process what he had just done. Donovan, on the other hand, seemed deflated, but still maintained a defiant look. "You think you've won, Wesley. This isn't over. Even if I'm arrested, you'll never be safe," said Donovan, his tone mixing threat and desperation. Wesley ignored the words, focusing on keeping the situation under control until the police arrived. "He lost. No matter what he says, he lost," Wesley thought as he slowly lowered the gun. The sound of distant sirens broke the tense silence in the room. Donovan looked towards the door, his face hardening. "You called the police? Pathetic." "I expected more from you, Wesley," he said with a bitter laugh. Wesley remained firm, positioning himself between Donovan and the exit. "You did this to yourself, Donovan. It's time to face the consequences," he replied, his tone making it clear there was no more room for negotiation. Elias, still quiet, watched everything closely, feeling a mix of pride and fear. Finally, this is going to end. Maybe now Wesley can have peace, he thought, crossing his arms in a protective gesture. The police officers quickly entered the house, guns drawn. Wesley raised his hands, indicating he was unarmed, and handed the gun to one of the officers. "This is the man you're looking for. He tried to force me to sign documents under threat," said Wesley, pointing at Donovan. The officers advanced, handcuffing Donovan as he tried to protest. "You're making a mistake. I'm the only one who understands how things should work," Donovan shouted as he was led out of the house. Wesley sighed deeply, finally feeling the weight of the last few hours start to dissipate. "It's over, Elias." "He can't hurt us anymore," he said, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. Elias looked at Wesley, his eyes shining with tears of relief. "I just wanted you to be okay, Wesley. I just wanted to help," he said, his voice trembling but full of sincerity. Wesley smiled, squeezing the boy's shoulder. "You did more than that, Elias. You saved us. Never forget that," he replied, his voice laden with gratitude. And as the two watched the police take Donovan away, the wrecked room somehow seemed less suffocating. After all, for the first time in a long while, they could breathe with a little hope. The sound of the phone broke the brief silence in the still wrecked house. Wesley, his heart heavy, picked up the vibrating cell phone from the broken table. He recognized the number immediately. It was from the hospital. "Please let it be good news," he thought as he answered with a touch of hope, mixed with fear. "This is Wesley," he said, his voice tense but trying to sound firm. On the other end of the line, a serious, laden voice responded. "Mr. Wesley, this is Vivian from the hospital reception. I'm sorry, but I have difficult news. Your wife, Eliza, did not make it through the surgery. We did everything we could, but unfortunately she passed away a few minutes ago," said the woman, her voice careful. Wesley froze, his legs seeming unable to support him. The phone almost fell from his hand, but he managed to hold on to it with difficulty. "No, it can't be. You said she had a chance," he mumbled, the pain evident in his voice. Vivian paused before continuing. "Mr. Wesley, I understand how difficult this is, but your daughter Nora is stable now. She's going to survive," she said, trying to bring some comfort. Wesley brought one of his hands to his forehead, feeling the weight of the news crushing his chest. Eliza, his wife, his support, his partner in all struggles, was no longer there. He felt as if the ground was opening up beneath his feet. Eliza. Why? Why now? "I couldn't say goodbye," he thought, while silent tears streamed down his face. Elias, who was watching Wesley with concern, approached carefully. "Wesley, what happened? Is it about Eliza?" Elias asked, his voice low but full of concern. Wesley looked at him, his eyes red with emotion. "She's gone, Elias. Eliza." is no longer with us, he said, his voice broken. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the air in the room had become denser. Elias looked down, not knowing what to say. He moved closer to Wesley and placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to offer some comfort. "Wesley, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. But you still have Nora. She needs you now," Elias said, with a maturity surprising for someone so young. Wesley nodded slowly, Elias's words piercing through the fog of pain that enveloped him. "You're right, Elias. Nora needs me. I need to be strong for her," he said, taking a deep breath, trying to control the tears. After a few moments of silence, Wesley picked up the phone again. He called the hospital, wanting to know more details about Nora. "Vivian, is my daughter really out of danger? Will she be okay?" Wesley asked, his voice still trembling, but now with an urgency that could not be ignored. Vivian responded with a more positive tone this time. "Yes, Mr. Wesley. Nora is stable. The antidote we administered was effective, and she's recovering well. But for now it's best if she stays under observation for a few more days," she explained. Wesley closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and pain. "Thank you. Thank you for everything," he said before hanging up. Wesley turned to Elias, who was still by his side. "Nora is alive. She's going to be okay. But we lost Eliza. We lost a part of us," he said, his voice laden with emotion. Elias nodded, understanding the depth of the pain Wesley was feeling. "I know nothing will bring Eliza back, Wesley, but you still have Nora, and she's going to need you more than ever now," Elias said, trying to convey strength. Wesley placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling a silent gratitude for his presence. "You're right, Elias. Eliza is gone, but I still have Nora, and I have you. I won't give up now," he replied with determination. The weight of the loss still lingered in the room, but Wesley knew he had to move forward. He looked around at the destroyed house, at the debris that symbolized the chaos Donovan had caused. "I won't let Eliza's legacy be forgotten. I'll rebuild this for Nora, for Eliza, and for myself," Wesley thought as he wiped away the tears. He looked at Elias again, a weak but genuine smile appearing on his face. "Let's get out of here, Elias. Let's go see Nora. She needs to know everything will be okay," he said, with a tone that mixed sadness and hope. As the two left the house, Wesley looked back one last time. He knew the challenges weren't over, but he also knew that Eliza's strength would continue with him. "I'll honor your memory, Eliza, and I'll take care of our family. No matter what happens," he thought as he walked alongside Elias towards the hospital, determined to face the future with courage, even while carrying the weight of loss. The night at the hospital was quiet, but inside Nora's room the atmosphere was charged with emotion. Wesley was sitting by his daughter's bedside, holding her hand gently. Nora had woken up a little while ago, and although she was physically stable, her expression showed that the emotional pain was immeasurable. Her red eyes from crying so much betrayed that she already knew what had happened. "She's gone, isn't she, Dad?" Nora asked, her voice fragile and choked up. Wesley nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes, my daughter. Eliza didn't make it," he replied, the sadness dripping from every word. Nora began to sob, turning her face into the pillow. Her body trembled as she tried to process the loss of her mother. "I couldn't say goodbye. I couldn't. She's gone without knowing how much I loved her," she said between tears. Wesley leaned in and kissed his daughter's forehead, his own tears silently streaming down. "She knew, Nora. She always knew. And she loved you more than anything in this world," Wesley said, trying to comfort her. But he knew that no solace would be enough in that moment. "I need to be strong for her, but it's so hard," he thought, squeezing his daughter's hand. As they shared the heavy silence of grief, Elias appeared at the door, hesitant. He was holding a small bouquet he had picked from the hospital garden, trying to find the courage to come in. Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Wesley nodded, beckoning him inside with a gesture. Nora looked at Elias, and for a moment her face hardened. But then, as if a weight had been lifted from her heart, she took a deep breath and motioned for him to come closer. "Elias, I said terrible things to you. But now I understand. I just want to apologize," Nora said, her voice still broken by emotion. Elias shook his head quickly, trying to hold back tears. You don't have to apologize, Nora. I understand. I just wanted to help, but it seemed like I was only getting in the way, he said, his voice full of guilt. Nora reached out to him, and he held her hand carefully, as if afraid of breaking her. No, Elias. You helped us more than I can explain. If it weren't for you, my father wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't be here, she said, as more tears streamed down her face. Wesley watched the scene in silence, feeling a mixture of sadness and hope as he saw the two reconcile. Thank you, Nora. That means a lot to me, Elias said, wiping his face with the sleeve of his shirt. He looked at Wesley and then at Nora, feeling more accepted than ever. I just want everyone to be okay. That we managed to move forward, he added with a sincere tone. Nora squeezed his hand tighter and nodded. We will, Elias. It will be hard, but we'll get through this together, she said, with a soft determination in her voice. Wesley smiled slightly, wiping his eyes before speaking. Eliza would be so proud to see this, to see how we are a family even in such difficult times, he said, his voice laden with emotion. The next morning, the trio prepared for the funeral. The hospital had released Nora to go, with the recommendation that she rest afterwards. As they dressed, the weight of the moment hung over them. Elias wore simple but clean clothes that Wesley had gotten for him. Nora, though still weak, insisted on wearing a black dress her mother liked to see her in. She always said I looked beautiful in black. It's the least I can do for her, Nora said, looking in the mirror. Wesley helped adjust the coat on her shoulders, feeling a tightness in his heart as he saw the resemblance between mother and daughter. You look beautiful, Nora. Your mother would be so proud, he said, with a melancholic smile. The cemetery was full of people who came to pay their respects, but Wesley, Nora, and Elias remained close together, forming an unshakable unit. Eliza's casket, covered in white flowers, was placed in the center of the reserved space, and the priest began the ceremony with words of comfort. Wesley stared fixedly at the casket, his hands firmly holding Nora's and Elias's. Eliza, I promise I'll take care of them. I'll honor your memory every day, he thought, as a solitary tear rolled down his face. Nora, beside Wesley, couldn't hold back her tears. She sobbed softly, but her father was there to support her, holding her firmly. Elias by her side looked at the casket with teary eyes. He had never had a real family, but he felt that Eliza had been a maternal figure to him, even if for a short time. I'm going to be part of this family. I'm going to honor her memory too, Elias thought, as a tear rolled down his cheek. When the ceremony ended, Wesley approached the casket and placed a white rose on it. Nora did the same, followed by Elias, who leaned in to murmur something. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Eliza. I promise I'll take care of them, he said, his voice trembling. As the casket was lowered into the ground, Wesley, Nora, and Elias stood side by side, united by grief and hope. The funeral was not only a goodbye, but also a moment of renewal for them. Despite the irreparable loss, there was something that connected them, the determination to move forward as a family, honoring Eliza's memory with every step they took. And as they embraced at the end of the ceremony, a silent certainty grew in their hearts. Together they could overcome anything. The days that followed the funeral were difficult, but they also brought a sense of renewal. Wesley's house, though still in need of repairs, was already beginning to regain its life. Nora had been released from the hospital, and more she seemed determined to move forward, honoring her mother's memory. Elias, now officially part of the family, proved to be a vital presence, always willing to help and bring a smile amid the sadness. Wesley, in turn, focused on rebuilding the security and stability of the home. Eliza wouldn't want us to be stuck in grief. We need to move forward for her, he often said, both to Nora and to himself. One afternoon, as the three were gathered in the living room, Nora looked at Elias and smiled. You know, Elias, if it weren't for you, maybe I wouldn't even be here. And I don't know if I've properly said this, but thank you. Really, she said sincerely. Elias, who was sitting on the floor with an open notebook, looked at her in surprise. I just did what anyone would do. I just wanted to help, he replied, shrugging. Nora laughed softly. You're wrong. Not everyone would have had the courage to do what you did. You're stronger than you think, she said, leaning in to give the boy a gentle hug. Wesley watched the two from a distance, a smile on his lips. He had feared that tragedy would separate them, but instead it united them in a way he had never imagined. "You two are what gives me the strength to keep going. Eliza left us, but I still have you, and that's all I need," Wesley said, his voice firm but laden with emotion. Elias looked at him, his eyes shining with tears. "I never had a real family before. You're everything to me now. And I'll do whatever it takes to be worthy of you," he said, with a maturity that was impressive. Some weeks later, the house was completely restored. Wesley organized a special dinner to mark a new beginning. The table was filled with dishes Eliza used to prepare, and the house, though different, seemed full of life again. Nora wore the same black dress she had worn at the funeral, but this time with a smile on her face. Elias, dressed in new clothes Wesley had bought for him, was sitting next to her, more animated than ever. "Did you cook all this, Wesley? I don't think I've ever seen you in the kitchen before," Nora joked as she looked at the dishes. Wesley laughed, shaking his head. "Let's just say I had a little help from my chef friend, but what's important is that we're here together," he said, raising his glass. Elias looked around the table, feeling the warmth of the moment. He had been through so much, but now sitting there with Wesley and Nora, he finally felt like he belonged somewhere. Eliza would be so happy to see this, he thought, as he took a spoonful of rice. "I think we need to make this a habit. Dining together whenever we can, being a real family," Elias said, looking at the two of them. Wesley nodded, his smile widening. "You're right, Elias. That's what we are now. A family. And nothing will change that," he replied, raising his glass in a symbolic toast. The evening continued with laughter and shared stories. Nora spoke about her favorite memories with her mother, and Wesley promised he would do everything to keep Eliza's legacy alive. "She was the soul of this house, and she always will be. But now it's us who will keep it alive in our hearts," Wesley said, his eyes shining with emotion. Elias nodded, feeling more connected to them than ever before. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but now he had something he had never had before: a home. When the night came to an end, Nora said goodbye and went to her room, leaving Wesley and Elias alone in the living room. Wesley looked at the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Elias, you're not just someone who helped us. You're part of this family. And I want you to know that this will always be your home," Wesley said, his voice full of affection. Elias looked at him, unable to hold back tears. "Thank you, Wesley. I'll never forget this, never," he replied, hugging him. As the house lights went out, a feeling of peace finally filled the space. The sound of the wind outside seemed gentler, almost as if celebrating the family's new beginning. They had faced pain and danger, but together they found strength and love. And with that, they knew they could face anything the future had in store for them. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that is about to appear on your screen. We are immensely grateful to have you here with us. Now you can click on the links appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, filled with valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.